And so trying, my encouragement and what I feel like God has called me to do is like that the intimacy with him is the win. And like eyes fixed on him is the win, and everything else comes from that, but is secondary to that.
Welcome to the Everyday Faith Podcast, where we believe you can live out your faith every day by starting with belief, embracing your mission, committing to obedience, and pursuing community. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jess. Today, we are so excited to welcome Kaycee Stanley to the podcast. Kaycee's the founder of the Real Hope Project, an organization she and her husband Pete started to help change the narrative around foster care and adoption by telling the stories of waiting kids. So cool. With a deep love for Jesus, kids, and storytelling, the mission is also personal. Kaycee and Pete adopted one of their own children after meeting him through a Real Hope video, and they now have 4 beautiful children. We're really looking forward to a conversation today about motherhood, faith, and the mission the Lord's had her on. So let's jump right in. Kaycee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Yes, we are really excited to be connected with you because you know motherhood maybe from a different perspective, or honestly a deeper understanding maybe than a lot of us might understand motherhood. You guys have known for a while that you wanted to adopt. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. I had felt called to adoption really since I was like a kid, like 12 years old. I knew I wanted to adopt one day.
Well, how did you know that? Was there something, a story that happened?
Not really. There's like a lot of threads throughout my life that are like, you know, my best friend in elementary school was adopted, or like my youth pastors growing up, they adopted, and I was their like primary babysitter. And, you know, like, so I just saw adoption throughout my life a lot. But a lot of it is just this like deep gratitude that I have for my own family, and just this like realization that I had even from a pretty young age of like, man, some kids don't have what I have. And like, how would I even be surviving if I didn't have the family of origin that I have? And so yeah, I felt like it was something that God put on my heart pretty young, and kind of knew from the jump this would be a part of my story.
Well, I love that, you know, where God says he puts desires in your heart.
Yeah.
And there's no at 21, right? And he put it in your heart, obviously, and you realized at a young age, and then how all the things were kind of orchestrated to help you develop that passion. That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah, it's cool. Sometimes I think about the fact that I was a freshman in college when my son was born, but I didn't meet him until I was 30. And so just like all the work that God was doing in me and kind of preparing me and my husband, and during that whole season, it's just kind of wild to think about.
Would you share a little bit
That's
about
awesome.
that?
Yeah, about meeting him, or
About that season of preparation and kind of just how that all developed.
Yeah, totally. Well, it kind of like just kind of continued to escalate. So like I went to Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota, and was a youth ministry and biblical and theological studies major at Bethel.
So you're smart.
And super smart. So you guys should be intimidated. I became a youth pastor right out of college, and just loved teenagers, and met my husband working with teenagers, and we just kind of like
he wasn't a teenager, just to be clear.
No.
Details.
He wasn't that, but he was one of my volunteers, which was like its own little scandal.
Yeah, you know.
He was like my lead volunteer, and then we fell in
For a
love.
reason. Yep.
Yeah. So we just kind of, you know, even our relationship was built on like ministering to teenagers and having a heart for teenagers. And so I ended up going to seminary at Fuller Seminary out in Pasadena, and I took a class there called Orphanage Alternatives, which was all about like the church loves orphanages and loves to like support and build orphanages. But at the end of the day, an orphanage is an institution, and it's not the ideal setting for kids to be. And so it was just kind of really asking critical questions about the adoption landscape, and learn more about just like the deepest need for adopted families is teenagers. There's lots of families that are open to little ones, which is beautiful, but not as many that are open to teenagers. So it was just like this kind of fire that just kind of kept flaring up of like, I think it's going to be teenagers. I think we're going to end up with teenagers.
Wait, so like that, you realized that?
That was like probably 2014, 2015, kind of in that range.
Yeah.
And then we started the adoption process, but if you guys know anything about the process, it takes a long time to get licensed.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of in the process of getting licensed while launching our nonprofit and kind of seeing in real time, like, man, when you want to learn more about a kid who needs to be adopted, you don't get to know anything. Like, all you know is like, you get their photo and you get like a paragraph that's like, Joey likes soccer. And like, that's it,
Yeah.
Or you get to hear the really hard stuff of like,
Yep.
truly like, here's some of the hardest things this kid's ever been through. And here's the way that, he or she responded in their darkest moments, which is like not a good way to be. That's not how I'd want you to introduce me on the podcast today. It's like, here's Kaycee and let's talk about her issues. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and nix that.
She completely crumbled. Yeah. It's like,
Yes, totally. So anyway, it kind of coincided. Our own adoption journey and launching Real Hope kind of happened at the same time. And then by the time we were licensed, we met our son pretty quickly after that and just fell in love with him. I was on his video shoot and just kind of fell in love with him on a shoot. Knew he was the one.
You were kind of being developed at the same time. You're in this process of wanting to start adoption, and you saw the need. You started Real Hope, and those just kind of came together at just the right time with your son.
Here's my question. What were some of the characteristic or character development that you went through in that period you just shared?
Yeah. Oh gosh, so much. I feel like, it was probably from the time, if we take it from when I was a freshman in college to the time we adopted, that's like over a decade. Yeah. And there's just like so much just personal growth that happens during that time. But I think the pieces that really were connected to adoption was, one, just growing in my understanding of the fatherhood of God and like just the identity of the church in being people who go after the vulnerable and the kids who get left behind, and learning more about church history and the way that the church would care for vulnerable kids in this like absolutely unprecedented way, which is still being really carried by the church today. It's like any crisis pregnancy center, any adoption agency, not exclusively, but almost exclusively, is like built by believers. And so just like really a lot of that kind of fueling that fire. But then I think some of the like more challenging pieces were really needing to come to terms with, I think I had this impression of myself, like I'm a youth pastor, my whole life has been working with kids. I can love any kid, like bring it on, no matter what it is, I can handle it,
That's a scary prayer.
Yeah. Yes. And so there was like, even as my husband and I went through this process, there were different kids that we kind of considered throughout the process of, would we be a good fit for this kid? And the process of feeling like, no, we would not be a good fit for this kid. Like there's kids we couldn't handle, was really humbling for me. I kind of had a like, I can do any of it, like bring it, and everybody should be adopting. And if you're not adopting, you're not really a believer. It was like almost my like lens. And so it was just kind of this humbling process of like, no, this is a calling, and God needs to highlight the kid that's the right fit. And there's humility in that process. And that was really, I think, important for me to learn. And then when Tez came home, our son's name is Martez. We call him Tez, or Tezzy Wuzzy. Yeah, Tezzy Wuzzy Bing Bong to say his full name.
It's gonna be Tezzy Wuzzy Bing Bong.
Yeah, he loves it. Yeah, just kind of his own story of feeling chosen by us was so special to him. Like it wasn't just a like, we just wanted to adopt, and it was like, bring it on, anybody. It was like, no, we felt like God spotlighted you, and there was something about you in particular that we loved and felt connected to and wanted to commit to forever. Like for him to kind of know that was a part of his story, I think was really important.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. No, you've been working with kids, through youth ministry as well as now your own 4 children. And it probably looks pretty different in those different contexts, especially your kids are not all right in the same age range. But how do you're talking about that identity a little bit, right? That God chose you for us and us for you. And isn't that an amazing thing? But I also know there's so much trauma in adoption, but also, it's hard enough, even if adoption isn't involved, to speak identity intentionally into your children. And so I'm just curious what that has looked like Maybe you feel Holy Spirit leading you more to talk about the youth ministry side, or maybe with adoption or your own birthed children. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah. I think it has looked pretty different, obviously, with like little ones versus a 20-year-old, and just kind of how you navigate, kids who've only ever known me and their dad and our safe home, and versus our 20-year-old who just came from a very different experience. And so it's felt like when we talk with our daughters, so our little ones are all girls, and when we talk with them, just last night, my 5-year-old loves taking care of her little sisters, and just, it's like she's like just a second mom in the house. But she gets really mad if our middle daughter doesn't respond in the same way. And she was like, Vinny left Milo downstairs and she didn't even wait with her. And she was so mad that Vinny didn't like wait with Milo to get up the stairs. And it was just this sweet opportunity. I like got down on her level and I was like, goodness. So our 5-year-old is named Taika. And then I was like, Taika, you are such a little mama. And I love that, like, you love taking care of babies. And like, that's what God put inside of you. But that doesn't mean Vinny has to also be a mama. And like, just kind of like helping her like celebrate that and move from kind of anger, sort of like triggered, to like, hey, we're just gonna like love this about you, and you don't have to be a mama all the time because you're 5. And she just like, I can see her accept and absorb that immediately. Where with our 20-year-old, it's hard for me to not call him our teenager anymore. With our 20-year-old, we speak identity over him in the same way, but he's got different battles that he's fighting in terms of how easy it is for him to like receive that. Like he knows we think that he knows we think that he's a leader, and like he's made to like emulate the father heart of God, and like he knows we think that, but he's kind of like, I'm good. Like I want to do my own thing. I want to hang with my friend, and like that's totally developmentally natural. But it's just been interesting to see the way it just gets absorbed differently, and the like persistence I think that's needed with our oldest for him to be able to like fully receive that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Do you speak it differently with your older son? Because I imagine, right, like language, if you talk about it, if I talk to, I don't know, if I talk to Dan, he's not my child.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
But if I talk to Dan the same way and encourage him the same way as I encourage my 4-year-old, it's like obviously not going to fit. But so how does that differ? Can you describe that a little bit? Because I'm sure we have a lot of listeners who maybe have older kids or even adult children that they're trying to speak to and encourage, but they're trying to figure out like, I encouraged them when they were little, but then there's just been this disconnect because I don't know how to do it now that they're not little.
Totally. I mean, I can speak to what we've seen on just a real practical level, and we're still like in process, of course, with all of this, but even just practically, there's like a lightheartedness to it when we talk with Tez. We're like, when we talk with our daughters, we're like on their, we're so earnest in what we're saying. But if I said to Tez like, oh, I just love that you have the Papa heart of God, he would be like, oh my gosh, back off. And so it's much more just kind of lighthearted of like, that's so cool that you even, that you noticed that kid was sitting by himself. That's awesome. And like, that's as far as it goes. And like, just keep it light.
Play it cool.
Yes. But I also think, and this would be no surprise to anybody, but there is just a different connection that my husband can have with Tez than me. And so I'm a natural encourager. I'm naturally positive. And so it just kind of flows out of me, pretty easily. My husband is more quiet, and you can just kind of see when Pete, my husband, kind of turns that on with Tez of kind of calling out identity, it's like a flower to the sun. There's a like, oh, that's how you see me, that he just kind of hears differently. So there's been some strategy with me and Pete of like, hey, you need to be the one to say this, because he'll just absorb that in a different way from his dad.
That's really cool too.
It's really cool you guys are mature too, and not, I've heard people say, well, he doesn't respond to me like that. Oh, he won't receive it from me like that. And it's like, it's not about you. So I appreciate how you guys do that. Where like, you know what, for you, this is what's going to work best for him. And for me, this is what works best for him. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And it could look different for another child and different parents.
Yes, in different seasons. There have been times
Yeah.
when we kind of needed to switch roles in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But being self-aware, I think, is an important thing we're learning with our kids. We have a 6-year-old now who's the oldest of 4, and to transition your mind from talking to a 6-year-old to a 4-year-old to a 2-year-old to a 1-year-old, you're like, all right, they're all in different stages. So the standards for this one is much different than the standards for the 2-year-old.
Yes. Oh,
So
absolutely.
I can't imagine 20 and 5. That's a very big difference.
It's a big difference for sure.
I'm curious for you, Kaycee, as you kind of look back over your years of being a parent, the last, 7 or 8 years, right? That would be.
Yeah.
What have been some of the most challenging seasons that you guys have walked through? Because there's business involved as well, that you and your husband are both involved in Real Hope, right?
Yep.
What have some of the most challenging seasons looked like, and how have you been obedient to get through that well and thrive through those seasons?
Yes. Yes. Well, let me think. There's a couple different seasons I could share about, and of course, wanting to honor just like my son's privacy and his story,
Yes.
so I can kind of tell this like in some some vague ways.
Yeah.
Got it.
But I think for us, well, one just real practical challenge has been schedules of a high school athlete and like a 6-month-old baby, and it's like Tez's football game is at 7. The girls need to be asleep at 7, and so just the like divide and conquer of that, like that's just a really practical challenge we've seen.
Yeah.
I think the two kind of bigger challenges that come to the surface for me as we have tried to help our son navigate relationships with his biological family, and that has been in some ways really beautiful and really redemptive, and in some ways it's been really, really hard, and trying to help bring connection and healing where it makes sense to do that, and trying to have some healthy guardrails where it's maybe not the right move yet. And so that's complicated for a teenage boy to navigate, and complicated for me as a mom to navigate. So that's just been like a ongoing, like we just have to keep bringing this back to the Lord and like continue to seek guidance on like what is the next step, and the next step has changed many times. It's like, okay, we're gonna keep building connection, and nope, we're not, now we're gonna back off a little bit, and now we're like and just needing wisdom beyond what we have has been for sure a challenge. And then the last thing I would say would be just the process of letting go of control as our son has gotten older and is now on his own. But like I think any parent of teenagers, screen addiction is like no joke, especially, and without getting into too much of the weeds, but like there's some pretty wild research that I've heard around screen addiction and a brain that's been through trauma, and just the intensity of that addiction. And so my husband and I tried for years of like, we are going to shut down. We're shutting down screens. We're taking every electronic into our room, and we're like, we've got all the remotes in our room at night, and we're like, we will win this screen battle. And eventually we got to a place of like, we cannot win. He will find an iPad. He will find a phone. Like, and so eventually we kind of had to say like, okay, we are going to like, it felt painful. I know this sounds trivial, but it was like a thing, guys.
I believe it.
Of like, we have to give you over to this. Like, you are choosing this. We cannot change your mind. We cannot win this battle. And so we have to give it to you. Like, we're giving it over to you, but we're not enabling you. So we kind of like had to be okay with losing that battle, but also saying, you're going to have to pay for your own Wi-Fi. You're going to have to pay for your own phone. You're going to pay, like, just kind of needing to flip that script. That was, I think,
I'm really hoping our kids don't have phones in 10 years, whenever it is.
Yes.
Like I'm like, we're going to get them a watch with, you can make calls and texts. I'm like, that's it.
Yeah. I want one of those
real.
lines. My little ones will not have phones until they're like 18. I swear to you, after what we have.
Yeah. I hope we don't have, I don't think we'll have phones in 12, 15 years.
You don't? What do you think's going to happen?
Right?
I'm not ready for it.
Well,
Let's just
that's another podcast.
save that for another
Let's go down that trail. I want to change topic.
Kaycee, one of the things though that I'm that's resonating with me is this idea that sometimes we have to pivot. We've got to change plans. We've got to surrender what that vision that we had. Now, I'm not saying, don't have a vision. Don't, don't go forward intentionally because you're just going to have to scrap it anyway. Not at all saying that. Yeah. But I am saying that when it turns out that, the Lord, these doors are shutting and the Lord's just leading you a different path, or you find yourself having to pivot 5 times and change the plan, that doesn't mean we failed. It doesn't mean we didn't hear the Lord. It doesn't mean he's not using it. It's like, no, maybe sometimes we just have to accept and like you said, kind of give it over to the Lord, surrender it, and not act as though this is life or death. Like, we just have to trust that God's doing something in it, even if it didn't look the way that I wanted it to, whether it's the smallest little thing in life or this, huge battle, in motherhood that it feels like we just failed. And it's like, okay, no, we didn't fail. Yeah. We know God wins in the end, and we know that he's going to use all of this. He's going to use it all.
Yeah. Amen. We had a pastor when we lived in LA, we had a pastor who would say, it was like one of his pet peeves when people would say like, well, God just closed that door, so we had to move on. And he's like, sometimes you're supposed to kick the door down, or sometimes you're supposed to find a different door into the same room, and just the sort of defeatist mentality I think that we can have sometimes. And it's like, or if it doesn't go my way, then I have failed.
Sure.
It's so funny. We want a formula, right?
Yes.
And it's like, no, the Lord called you to that. He is saying, don't open the door yet, but it's still there and it will be open, but y'all need to be patient.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
I've been waiting on God for this big thing I want to do. And he just opened the door 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I've been so patient, and I'm not good at being patient. And
you're great at it.
Yeah. And I've been so patient and waiting. And then he opened the door, and now all these things are starting to happen. Miracle stories of so the year I waited, it feels like all of that time has already been I don't want to say redeemed because it wasn't, but all that time has already been used. And what happened in a year could now happen in just a couple weeks.
Yes.
And that's the cool part about following God.
Sure.
Is and it doesn't always happen like that either, but.
No. But I think about that time, right? And it's because it felt like this door wasn't opened yet, your focus and energy was put in other places that was maybe preparing you in a way, or preparing our family, or, building connections that needed to be built, so that when the door opened, it would all align and fall into place the way it's supposed to. I don't know.
Right. Yes. And I always love, my mentor said, you work while you wait. Right. And the door's not open yet, but how can you develop as God's child and becoming the person they've created you to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of character development that's happened in the last year for myself.
Yes.
So, I didn't think there was that much, but apparently there was.
Well, I feel like waiting feels so passive. And I've had some friends encourage me, because I'm the same way, of just there's active warfare, active growth that is happening when you're waiting, but it feels like passivity. I hate it so much. But it's the stuff that God is doing. One of my kind of crazy stories about that is when we started, so Real Hope, we will go to churches all the time on Sundays, and churches all across the spectrum. We speak at Catholic churches and Pentecostal churches and Baptist churches and all these. And my story is that I grew up in a pretty Pentecostal environment in the Assemblies of God denomination. Then I went to Bethel, which is a pretty straight Baptist school. And then I got hired as a youth pastor at a fairly liturgical Lutheran church. And to do youth ministry, which in my mind was I'm going to be leading worship nights, and kids are going to be experiencing the Spirit. And kids in my youth group were what time is religion? I have to get confirmed. And it was oh my gosh. And I was there for 8 years. and loved it, loved this community. But boy, did I feel like a fish out of water a lot of the time. And just like, what am I doing here? I don't even speak the same language. I'm not Lutheran, and I'm like teaching the catechism. And so it was such a season of growth, and I loved this community, and they loved me, and I think God used it in cool ways. But it wasn't until we started Real Hope that I was like, I've got connections to churches now in the AG, in the Baptist community, in the Lutheran community. I can walk into any of these churches and feel confident and comfortable. I know what the social expectations are and how the service is going to run. And it was just so cool to be like, I spent a decade in this church. Like, I love these people, but what am I doing? Only to see years later, like, oh, God was like preparing a way for us to lead this organization that I couldn't have even conceived of at that time, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Isn't that fun?
That's good.
Yeah, you don't know sometimes until you look back. You're like, oh, that's what God was doing.
Yes, totally.
Well, Kaycee, as we wrap up part 1 of our conversation, I'd love for you to speak to our listeners and share some encouragement for the person who might be in a season of waiting or stretching, or, they're hoping for something that they're not seeing come to fruition yet. What would you say, just as a piece of advice or encouragement to that person?
Yeah. I think one of the phrases that God has put on my heart in different seasons is this phrase, intimacy over impact. And just like leaning into it. It's like, I'm saying this like it's easy to do, and it is not easy to do.
Yeah.
But
Right.
like leaning into intimacy with God over like, how am I going to have impact in the world? Like, how am I going to build this thing that I want to build? Or how am I going to build my family the way I want to build my family? Or whatever it is, like waiting to kind of see I'm so outcome focused. And I think many of us are. And so trying, my encouragement and what I feel like God has called me to do is like that the intimacy with him is the win. And like eyes fixed on him is the win, and everything else comes from that, but is secondary to that. That is, I think, maybe my lifelong journey of learning
That's
that.
so
But
good, though.
that would be my encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Kaycee. So great talking with you, and we look forward to part 2.
You too.
Thank you for listening to this conversation from the Everyday Faith Podcast. Our goal is to inspire everyday faith conversations. Please join us by rating and reviewing wherever you're listening, and most importantly, by sharing with a friend. For more resources like this, visit our website, askaboutmyfaith.com. God bless you as you live out your faith in your everyday rhythms of life.